Between 1861 and 1865, Americans fought the bloodiest conflict in the nation's history. Over 600,000 soldiers died, leaving a legacy of physical loss that scarred an entire generation. Many attempts to explain this loss rely on single-sentence myths, that the North fought a crusade to end slavery, or that the South fought a principled battle for states' rights. Real history is rarely that clean. These simple explanations overlook the messy, evolving motivations of the people who actually lived through it. To understand why the nation actually broke, we have to look at the intersection of economic survival, constitutional law, and the brutal reality of political power. Every legislative crisis, regional economic anxiety, and constitutional clash of the early 1800s ultimately funnels back into the institution of slavery. In the early 1800s, the United States was expanding rapidly westward. But every new territory added to the map forced the same dangerous question: would slavery be legal there? This was a problem of political math. Whether a new state was admitted as free or slave directly determined which faction controlled the U.S. Senate, and by extension, the direction of the country. Politicians tried to manage the crisis by drawing literal lines across the map, like the Missouri Compromise, balancing free and slave states. But as settlers pushed into unorganized Western territories, the math became impossible. These compromises merely delayed the inevitable confrontation. The battle over geography was a fight for political survival. If slavery were blocked from expanding, the South would lose its ability to influence federal law. This context reframes the states' rights argument. Southern leaders argued the federal government was becoming too powerful and overreaching into local affairs. But that logic requires us to ask, what right were they trying to protect? The Southern economy relied on enslaved labor to drive the massive production of cotton. By the mid-1800s, millions of African Americans were held in bondage, making the institution the literal foundation of Southern society. When Southern states drafted their official declarations of secession, they were explicit. These documents repeatedly identified the threat to slavery as the primary reason for leaving the Union. Southern leaders utilized the constitutional framework of states' rights to protect their most vital interest, the legal right to own human beings. The election of 1860 pushed the tension to a breaking point. Abraham Lincoln won the presidency without carrying a single Southern state. Lincoln did not run on a platform of immediate nationwide abolition. Instead, his Republican Party focused on a single, non-negotiable goal: stopping the expansion of slavery into new territories. To the South, a president who blocked expansion was a president who intended to let slavery slowly die. Without new slave states, the South's legislative power in Washington would eventually vanish. In December 1861, South Carolina seceded. Others soon followed, forming the Confederate States of America. By April 1861, the political crisis became a war when Confederate forces opened fire on Fort Sumter. Lincoln's victory on a platform of non-expansion convinced Southern leaders that their political path within the Union was permanently blocked. This dead end converted decades of legislative argument into the deadliest violence in American history. When the fighting began, Lincoln's stated goal was the preservation of the Union. He did not initially frame the war as a campaign to free every enslaved person. That changed in 1863. Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which redefined the conflict. The war for the Union was now a direct struggle to dismantle the institution of slavery. This transformation was driven by the actions of Black Americans themselves. By the end of the war, nearly 200,000 African American men had joined the Union Army and Navy to fight for their own liberation. The Civil War was the result of a decades-long struggle over power, authority, and human bondage that finally outgrew every attempt at compromise. Embracing this complexity helps us see why the war became unavoidable. Only by understanding how these forces converged can we see why the conflict still shapes the meaning of freedom in America today.